Man, well, if you have a company, a small company, and if you are the one speaking, are you media trained? And I don't even know there's a official class, but understand your talking points to the brand, understand just base level concepts. And if you are like a CEO and co-founder, you don't want to be, then find somebody on your team who is. Because like that's another thing. I like this, so I spend energy there.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a company and you're growing, start training these talking points now. How do you teach the people inside the brand to speak the same?
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end of the day, man, from a media standpoint, people care about stories. They just do. And how can you churn anything back to a story?
Welcome to the Culture Goodr podcast, a behind the shades look at creating and changing culture inside of goodr sunglasses.
Hey, welcome to the Culture Goodr podcast. Today we're talking about the value of media training and why we created a course for it at goodr. How's it going, Steven?
Doing well, my friend.
Good.
Ready to talk media?
Yeah, let's do it. So I'm just curious, why do you think media training is an important skill in general?
Man, well, I think we're all salespeople to some degree, in every aspect of life. And, when I say media training, I think of the ability to speak on behalf of our brand, right? That's how we define it here. I don't actually think the ability to speak in front of a brand, speak about our brand in public. I don't actually think it's necessary for every single person at goodr. Some roles it's really important for, other roles it does not matter. But if people want to be able to go to a conference, do a panel, those type of things, we need to take ownership and actually teach people how to speak about goodr in general. So it's a function of ownership and us giving people teaching people how to fish.
Right. Yeah. We never want to put somebody in a position we haven't given them the tools to succeed, right? And this is that.
Yeah.
So we created a media training course, and the idea was, somebody's going to get asked to appear on a podcast, or they're going to a trade show, or they might end up on a panel or something. So in that case, they can go through this course and get the tools they need to feel confident in that situation. So Steven, you got to go to the graduation of our very first kind of beta class. We had the, giant backdrop and the lights and cameras and everything on there. Just curious, what was your experience of that? What did you notice? And what were some of the kind of ways you were coaching folks through it?
Yeah. Was there 7 people in the class, Shaun? Yeah. What, my experience of it was, wow, 7 people essentially volunteered to spend how many weeks?
It was like 12 weeks by the time we were done.
Yeah. Right. So 7 people wanted to spend 3 months learning to talk about our brand. And so that's just a really cool, humbling experience. And then as we got there and as you experience it, there was any sorts of learnings that crept up. But I think my first thought was, wow, we have a lot of amazing people who are very interested in doing really good work and care about the brand.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and that showed because of the clear effort they put in preparing as well, right?
Yeah, for sure. And nobody was paid to do this. They all opted in.
Yeah, right, for sure. Okay. So aside from just, gratitude and humility, you're watching the interviews go on. What did you notice about the way that folks were answering their questions?
Yeah, I think in the moment, the thing that I picked up on immediately was, once people can ground it into a story they experienced, they completely changed. And us as listeners feel connected. So I have 2 things. There's that one, and then there is the realization afterwards of, there is presenting, storytelling, talking points, media training. So we'll hit that in a second.
Sure.
Man, I think there's any number of things. One of the deep origins of this actually is I've always been the voice of the brand, and I will be to a higher, as long as I'm here, I will be it from a certain level. But what I realized is there's any number of stories about the company. So somebody be like, oh, tell me about how did goodr start? And sometimes I'd hear people actually just misquote myself, and I'm like, oh, I can't. We need to. If we have people speak on behalf of a brand, we need to have them understand base level things. But what I realized as I was watching the graduation was, oh man, there's a handful of talking points people need to know, but we need to teach them the skill actually to pivot quickly and start telling their own story. So when somebody asks, oh, what about, tell us about goodr's culture. Really the what we should be teaching people is to say, oh, well, we have a pretty wild culture. We define it as this, but let me tell you my favorite thing about our culture, and then insert story about.
Right.
I think that was the realization of, oh man, what are the handful of talking points people need to just know? That needs to be able to rip off, and then everything else is a pivot into telling their story. Because once anybody who was answering questions started grounding it in their everyday life, then you just felt the connection, and it became so much easier for them to talk about the brand.
Yeah, right. There's this shift from repeating the thing you memorized, right? Okay, it's fun, fashionable, functional, affordable, and like you're kind of like doing the thinking, to just being totally animated and be like, oh my gosh, I came in for fun, right? Like this is, and then it's all of a sudden everything feels alive and vibrant, and like you said, you feel connected to yourself, but you also feel connected as a listener.
Yeah, and I think that I haven't done this exercise yet, but when you kind of sit back and the handful of things that people need to know are, it's not a lot. It is the no slip, no bounce. It is, high level, how we started problem solution. It is actually less than you think, because I don't think anybody needs to know a biography on my life from 2015 to 2018.
Right.
The realization is we actually need people to just flip it and talk about it from their own lens.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So if you have this kind of toolkit of like, you're thinking culture, you've got values of fun and authenticity to draw from, right? There's like different positioning. It's like the 4Fs. There's all sorts of entry points to a personal story. How do you pivot that to go, well, hey, I wasn't here in 2015. I joined in 2022, but tell you what I love about, whatever, like this particular thing. So it's like, how can you take that brand piece and like use it as a lily pad to get to a personal story?
Yeah, that's a good analogy. And I think the other thing that as we reflected on it was like, oh man, you know what? There's actually I think there's maybe 4 things going on here, and I would need to think this through, but there is, I think, opportunity for goodr U to, one, there's how do you teach people how to present? That is just get in front of the room, presenting. Then there's the storytelling workshop, which, there's different degrees of that, but that is really way more telling a story. They're actually kind of functionally different. Being able to professionally walk up and say, hey, I'm going to walk you through a budget, that's a presenting, not a storytelling. Then there is, I would actually say before media training, there is brand talking points. So somebody who just goes to conferences or goes to trade shows, anybody who's out on the road speaking to retailers, they should actually just have our brand, they should know our brand talking points. And then there is this third level of media training, which is the lily pad, and then also the ability to not put your foot in your mouth about the brand.
Or the redirect of like, oh, that's not a question I'm qualified to answer, going to answer, whatever. And shifting it to something that you can and will answer, but without being a jerk about it.
Yeah.
Nice. So something that just struck me is like, as the brand's coming up, basically everyone's going to trade shows, right? Or like you're out there kind of hustling a lot. And so those talking points are flowing naturally. They're not something you're really thinking about. But then as we get to this size and this position, we kind of have to make them a little more formulaic and like do a message repeat kind of thing, right? So as we've shifted from, it's like a bunch of jack of all trades, kind of everybody's doing a little bit of everything, to being much more specialized, getting into this kind of mindset where you sort of boil down the talking points to their core is really, really important, right?
It's really important. And man, I actually think it's very contextual to the role, where what does the person do? Like what's important for them to have expertise on, and what is it important for them not to.
Yeah.
But the simplest level is right. It's like if everybody understood just the four sections of the ethos and knew what our four anchors were and knew the four F's, like that's pretty much good there.
Yeah, right, totally. So as a company, I mean, for someone who's listening, right, thinking about, well, what are those things? Like, how do we get to that level of clarity so that we can communicate it, so that we can empower someone who might need to reference that information?
Yeah. I mean, we do a really good job here at our ethos. There's four things. It's our origin. We're extremely committed to fun, blah, 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 sunglasses. It's our mission. We exist to give you permission to be unabashed yourself. That's internal and external for our customers. It is our core values of fun and authenticity. And then it is our vision to create accessibility to as many customers as possible. So we repeat that during our staff meeting. I would say, man, I don't have a clever answer here. What is the fewest things of possible, as many as necessary? I think that, hey, so those things are core. I think our four anchors are core, and the four F's. Man, because we're a product company, and that's really our decision matrix for product. So I would say, what type of company are you? What is important there? But then, man, the ability for somebody to say, oh, well, here's if I'm running an ops team and somebody asks about marketing, like, well, I'm on our supply chain team, but those people marketing are killing it. It's for sure one of our anchors. They do a great job. Let me tell you about how we think about the customer through ops. That's what we're trying to teach here.
Right, for sure. Okay, so on that note, there's some lenses you can use to look through to be a little bit more on the spot rather than like super rigid and memorized, right? So one is the customer, the product, the customer, how we create connection or like connecting to a larger sense of community. Those are just a few things, but maybe just kind of riff on how you would think about, okay, I've got this set of brand talking points. Maybe there's a few ways that I can look at it, and then I'm trying to pivot to a personal story.
Yeah, I would say the most important thing here is just practice. And you can get that practice any number of ways, but man, you just to get good about talking about anything, you have to talk about it a lot.
Yeah.
Right. You have to talk about it a lot. I don't care if it's goodr or, running, playing guitar, you need to understand it and you need to talk about it a lot. And so I think there's just an element of, for people who do media training, they need to want to be a student of the brand. That's kind of number one. Number two, like for this podcast or anything that this podcast, we're always thinking about, like, all right, what do we want the customer to walk away with? So our customer is the listener. If you're a media training, what do you want the customer to walk away with? Are you talking to a retailer at a trade show? So understand their lens. Are you on stage? Am I on stage at an entrepreneur conference? And I'm like, oh, this person is an entrepreneur, so they want to know it through that lens. So it is quickly trying to understand who is the customer you're speaking to, and then what are those talking points? And all of these stories are just tools in a toolbox.
Yeah, of what? Creating some kind of value, right?
Creating value. Yeah.
Yeah. So you've been in a number of situations, right? Like from the early days of trade shows to now going on podcasts and giving talks and being on panels. You kind of alluded to it a little bit there, but can you talk through like a process for how you would prepare for something like that?
Yeah, I think that, well, one of the exercises is just not getting bored saying the same thing over and over again. Because if you're at a trade show talking to people, actually, there's a lot of repetition. And I think that is one, I don't know how to work people through that, but man, no slip, no bounce, all polarize, all fun. That's our value proposition. Oh, tell me these sunglasses. Oh, these are the new blank. They're no slip, they're no bounce, they're all polarized. And so I think one, how do you, so I'll take a step back. Understand the customers is number one. Number two, man, understand has this person heard this stuff before? Because you may be bored with it, but it may be brand new to them.
Right.
And that is something that I'm very aware of, where I have told so many stories hundreds of times, but I'm like, hey, Steven, you might be bored by this story, but this audience has never fucking heard this thing. So if you want to be professional, you pull energy. Like you're not bored by it. You are bringing energy. So I think be mindful of the energy that you are bringing. Next, during my weekly review, actually, I just collect stories. So every week I'm like, all right, oh, that's an interesting story. How do I relate there?
Yeah.
And we do the podcast, talks at TWC, on stage, Q&A. I get a lot of reps in personally of being able to talk about things. And so there's just the unsexiness of, I don't know, practice a lot.
Yeah, right. Practice.
Also, to be fair, I am very mindful of holding the skill. You don't need to answer every question. If you don't know the answer to it, don't do it. Also, if you do, once you start doing this, you realize in the media world, and when somebody's trying to like bait you into something, and so Q&A, I'll every once in a while get asked like, why should somebody buy goodrs over Oakley? And my response is the exact same every time, like, they shouldn't. Oakley makes a great product. If you like how Oakley looks and you like that price point, you 100% should buy Oakley. You just need to decide, would you prefer goodr or Oakley, and what price do you want to pay? Both are great options. and I think that is, I interpret that, I don't think there's a malice, sinister type of baiting, but they're just trying to get something, and I'm not going to put my foot in my mouth. Or
right.
If somebody asks me something completely out of context of, insert anything that could be controversial. We're very fortunate. We're 100% carbon neutral. We're 1% for the planet. Our packaging is 100% recycling. But if somebody's trying to ask you a question, debate that, your response is, anybody a goodr maybe besides me should be like, I'm here to talk about blank.
Yeah.
But if you follow up with me afterwards, I can get you any answer you want.
Nice. Yeah. There you go. So what do you do? How do you handle it when when you're the person on the hook?
If I know about the business in great detail, I'm a pretty transparent person, so I will talk about it if it is relevant to the situation we are in. The reality is it doesn't happen that often. I'll just talk to it. My methodology is, what do I think this person wants? And then I reach up into my brain and pull a story down and tell them a story.
Nice. Have you ever gotten a question that you just flat refuse to answer? It just seems so absurd. You're like, I can't even with this.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I would love that. I don't even know what that would be.
Nice. Well, let us know if that ever happens.
I do like a Q&A during our onboarding week, and I'll be like, hey, I'm a pretty transparent person, so I'll answer any question you want. And in fact, I dare somebody to ask me a question that I won't answer.
Yeah.
And so, I haven't had it happen yet. I think one of them more recently was somebody was like, I'm like, this person thinks I have one. What is it? And she goes, when's the last time you wear a pair of sunglasses that weren't goodr? I'm like, I don't know, 2014. like, you think I put any of my vases in goodr? Absolutely not.
Right. Good. No, clearly you haven't seen my closet. You got a pair exactly for every single outfit you're gonna wear. Yeah. Some of the best kits I think I've ever seen there. So one of the things you keep saying is story, right? Storytelling. And you actually developed the very first storytelling course at goodr. There's a number of things in there, but I'm just curious, you went through a few reps of that. If you were to break down a couple of frameworks or just share, here's what I've learned about telling a great story, how do you go about doing that? And what could someone take away that would help them to craft better stories?
Yeah. I've done storytelling workshops around Akimbo, which is Seth Godin's. They have a storytelling workshop that I've taken. They have a thing called the 5 C's. But 5 C's are content, even break down even easier. If you're telling a story, what's the context people need to know? What's the problem? What's the tension that there is? Because there's no tension, there's no story.
Right.
How was the tension resolved, and what was the result? And the entire time, you should be thinking, what do I want this person to walk away with? And so that is actually just a low grade circle that's in the back of my brain when I'm telling any story. It's come from doing it thousands of times. So I think from anybody is like, oh, okay, how can I relate? Because people connect with stories. How can I relate to them in a way that happened? And this is like what we saw inside the media training, which was as soon as people put it into their own day, their own life at goodr, their own experience, they are no longer reading bullet points on the brand. They are telling a story, and you can connect with said story. And so, man, I would say, how do you just get people to tell a story? And even maybe there's like the framework I just walked through, that's great. And if you want to get to that point, man, how do you just realize, you know what this calls for? This calls for a story, not an answer. Or the answer is a story.
Right. Yeah. Oh no, that's great. I love that. I heard you put it another way one time. It's like the story is like who wants what and what stands in their way. Like that like what's the tension, and just simple like characters and motion, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And then there's also, this is kind of outside of media training, but I think it's a really cool way to approach advice in general. Is like if someone asks your advice directly, never give them an answer. Always just reply with a story from your own experience that feels sort of relevant. And that way it's like, and don't connect the dots for them because anyone listening can draw their own conclusions, and they're not taking your advice. They're just learning from your experience.
Yeah. Or answer a question with a question. So everyone's advice.
Right.
I want advice. Oh, what are you looking to achieve here?
Yeah, right.
Then you let them unfold what you basically, you're just trying to be a therapist at that point. You're like, all right, like what are they trying to unfold? Okay. Oh, well, back when we started goodr, it really came back from a problem. Right? You start understanding, what is this person actually looking for right now?
Right. Yeah, no, that's so good. And it keeps us from answering the wrong question, right? Sometimes there's a feeling that something's more loaded than it was, when really it's just basic curiosity or total ignorance, right?
Yeah, and from a media standpoint, I'll do Q&As all the time, and somebody will ask a question, and often like I do follow-ups where, first off, I always say, oh, what's your name? Shaun. Hey, Shaun, great to meet you. Thanks for asking a question. They might ask a question about, it could be anything. It could be pricing. Big. Oh, that's interesting. Happy to talk to you about our pricing structure. Is there something is there something you need? Are you worried your prices are too high or too low? And so I'm just trying to understand, what are they really wanting to know? Okay, then I can backtrack and tell you a story on how we came up with $25 price point and why we believe in it.
Yeah.
I need to understand where you, so your job to be a good storyteller, you got to be a really good listener first.
I love that. And it also speaks to the people want the thinking behind the idea, not just the idea, right? You can hand over an answer, but if they don't have the question for that answer, it's irrelevant to them. So what you're saying is like, what's your question exactly? And how can I hand you a way to find the answer for yourself?
On that note, like, what do you think why do you think everybody who signed up for the media training workshop wanted to do it?
Well, they all had a context that they were headed into where this would help them feel more confident. In every case, it always starts from a position of confidence, right? Okay, I know I'm on the phone with customers all the time, or I'm headed to this trade show and I feel, nervous about that. I know I have to talk to folks. So loading in these basic skills provides that level of confidence to be more present in the moment and to have a better experience yourself, right? And to enjoy those interactions more and to feel more connected throughout.
Yeah. I think what I also just clocked in my brain is something we probably should be thinking about is, how do we train people to receive a compliment? And the reason this comes up is, if you're a listener out there, if you go to a trade show as goodr, a lot of times people just love the brand and they want to gush about the brand. And taking compliments can be a very awkward thing. And how do you, I have perfected it over time, but how do you make, thank you very much, that means a lot. And then pivot back with a question to them. So that is actually something that I'm like, oh, that's probably, it's something that we're not talking about. We probably should be.
Oh yeah, that's great. Well, so when someone's complimenting you, right, it's a bid for connection. They're recognizing something great, and they don't want to be shut down or like, oh yeah, thanks, no, it's whatever, right? That doesn't feel like connection. So, yeah, you kind of just said it, but someone reaches out with a compliment. How do you receive it?
I mean, this thing happens to me now. If I'm in, I'll be at a wedding and somebody will hear, oh, they'll come up, they'll hear through the grapevine, oh, that, the CEO and co-founder of goodr is there. So this happens normally. It can be in any context. In the big, hey, I heard you're the CEO and co-founder of goodr. I'm a huge fan. And so this is like, this is a common interaction. I will, depending on, hopefully there's a pause, because the first thing I want to ask them is like, thank you so much. What is your name? I want to know who this person is, because they are complimenting our brand. So that's very important. So usually it ends up with a story, loving the brand. And I have different versions of thank you very much. A lot of people work really, really hard to make this brand possible. And it's not just me, because I think sometimes people always put it on me. So I'm quickly like, thank you very much. And also, there is a lot of people here that work really, really hard. What's your name? How did you first hear about the brand? That's usually where I go.
Yeah.
And then I'll ask questions. I'll engage with them. I actually weirdly, I want to know about them and how they heard about the brand, because I'm just always curious. And then I'm looking to pivot into who this person is.
Yeah, it's interesting that you do that in almost any context, right? Like making that personal connection and being curious about what the question really is, or what the connection point really is there.
Yeah, and I mean, I owe debt of gratitude to anybody who's ever bought a pair of goodrs. And it's very humbling when people come up and gush about the brand. And it's awesome. Also, I want to know who this person is, and I'm proud of what we do, and also I'm very mindful of not reading your own press clippings of like yes. So right. That's also just a thing.
Yeah, totally cool. All right, so let's just kind of like wrap it up as you think about what we've talked about today. If you just kind of compress it into something that's like, if people remember nothing else about telling stories, interacting with any kind of interview scenario, what do you want them to take away from this episode?
Man, well, if you have a company, a small company, and if you are the one speaking, are you media trained? And I don't even know there's a official class, but understand your talking points to the brand, understand just base level concepts. And if you are like a CEO and co-founder, you don't want to be, then find somebody on your team who is, because like that's another thing. I like this, so I spend energy there. If you have a company and you're growing, start training these talking points now. How do you teach the people inside the brand to speak the same? And then at the end of the day, man, from a media standpoint, people care about stories. They just do. And how can you churn anything back to a story?
Beautiful. All right. Yeah, perfect. Well said. Well, thank you so much, Stephen. Thanks everybody for listening. Until next time, be excellent to each other.